Hi guys, Ed here on Thursday now for our midday catch up about all things workplace relations and how that interacts with the COVID-19 crisis. Excuse me. That isn't me being sick in the workplace at all. That's just something caught in the throat. Guys, we're still getting lots of questions about JobKeeper, and we'll talk more about that as the day goes on. A few things overnight, though, to update on. So first of all, there's been a bit of media, interestingly, starting to speculate about some of the things we've been talking about on here about JobKeeper. For example, there was an article in the Fin Review today which suggested that I think there's an academic somewhere in Adelaide saying that it may be that there is a loophole in JobKeeper that means that you can choose which employees to select for JobKeeper. As we've discussed here, is a big issue for businesses. A lot of you are asking whether you really have to pay everyone JobKeeper that is in principle eligible, or whether you can select people otherwise. And it's something that I've looked at in a bit of detail. I'm not sure I agree with the academics' position on it, that they seem to suggest that because you have to nominate people for JobKeeper, you can essentially not nominate eligible employees. I think, of course, you could not put down people that were eligible on your nomination form. Now, whether that would be within the spirit or letter of the legislation, it doesn't seem right to me. I think really the gap in this is as to whether people have been regular and systematic casuals. And if they haven't been regular and systematic casuals, which is not a very black and white thing, then you wouldn't nominate them. So there is a way in which some employees that might be eligible do not end up being nominated as eligible by you. The other way, of course, is the employee themselves doesn't respond to your request to them to complete the relevant paperwork, the nomination form, and therefore, even though they might be eligible, you don't end up putting them forward. So there are ways in which not all of your employees or all of your eligible employees will end up being nominated, but I'm not sure it's the loophole is as big as was suggested in the article in the Fin Review today. Related to that, in that article, there was a somewhat helpful guide to some of the questions that arise around coronavirus. I say somewhat helpful. It was written by 3 very senior lawyers, and it's a casual 50 pages of information about how to practically apply JobKeeper, citing all sorts of fascinating case law and such like, which I doubt is very useful to small business owners. Even with my background as being an employment lawyer, I didn't find it enormously useful, to be honest. It's just too technical. What we need is some practical commercial answers to how to apply JobKeeper, which we'll seek to give as the session goes on today. Related to that, some more media overnight there was an article in the Sydney Morning Herald in The Age, which is a bit of a worrying one for me. It was starting to nitpick at employers who are said not to be re-employing people, even though JobKeeper exists, so that people might have been made redundant, retrenched was the language they used, and that subsequently those employees have called up their employers and said, hey, now JobKeeper exists, put me back on your books. And the employer has said no. And there seems to be some criticism of employers for that. Now, my firm view would be that you've got to consider your business circumstances first and foremost. And one of those business circumstances would be that you simply don't know yet whether you are eligible for JobKeeper. So if I had a situation where someone rang me up today and said, hey, you've previously made me redundant, put me back on the books, you get JobKeeper, my firm answer to them would be, I don't know that I get JobKeeper yet. And look, we'll talk again if and when I know whether I am A, eligible, and B, whether I'm going to apply. And as to that, Christian Porter has suggested that there's really no reason why you wouldn't apply for JobKeeper as a business. Now, with due respect, I think that he's done some impressive things in getting JobKeeper up and running quickly. And this is the Minister for Workplace Relations. But I think the bit that he has missed on this, and he's got a bit of a self-interest in saying it, of course, is he wants people to use JobKeeper rather than people ending up out on the dole using JobSeeker and so forth. But what he's completely missing is this cash flow problem that a number of businesses are burdened by, which is if you started paying today on the presumption that you're eligible, which again I'd suggest you didn't do. But if you started paying today, you're going to have to hold that cash flow until you get paid back by the government. There's so many ifs and buts and whens about that. I know they're saying in May, but are they really going to get through all of this? It seems a bit odd to me that they've postponed the date on which you can apply back to the April the 20th if they're so sure they're going to start paying you at the beginning of May. And a prudent business owner just simply shouldn't be adding to their cost burden at this stage. Now, there are ways around that, what we'll talk about today, to make sure that you're able to access JobKeeper in due course if you're eligible, but that you won't, you shouldn't just jump in 2 feet first, as is urged by Christian Porter. The union's Sally McManus at the ACTU has gone further than Christian Porter, and she's threatening to name and shame employers that don't do the right thing. And I've previously said on here that that's just destructive language. I just don't. At this time, we should be being constructive about this. I've yet to meet an employer through this process who is using this in an opportunistic way to start getting rid of employees that they otherwise get, all this sort of stuff that seems to be part of the destructive narrative. The reality is people typically, in my experience through this live stream and also through clients, typically employers are being far too generous in their concerns for their employees. Making that employee hat that they wear take precedence above their responsibilities as business owners. My experience of small business isn't that people are trying to do the wrong thing in any way. So to come out with this sort of overbearing, threatening language about name and shame, I find a bit disappointing. I said that here before, and I'll get off my soapbox now. So there's a few updates in the media. For those of you tuning in New Zealand, there seems to be a bit of movement over there, and that it may be that you're heading back to stage 3 lockdown, which at the moment New Zealand is on probably more, well, it is a more significant lockdown than we're on here in Australia. And it's been undoubtedly more destructive to business over there. I can tell you now from our own perspective that we are doing less business in New Zealand than we're able to do in Australia, and I attribute that to the lockdown. The media and including a report about what the IMF said yesterday is that New Zealand looks like it's going to have a bigger economic downturn than even the US is, which seems to be a result of the very strident approach that was taken to lockdown. So it seems that the government may be backing off that a bit now, and they may be coming back to something that looks more like the Australian version of lockdown. And a brief reminder of that, guys, because I think that I've got a couple of great pivot stories that have come through from clients I just wanted to shout out. But as time goes on, what I'm seeing creep back into the public narrative is a series of restrictions that don't actually exist, which if you're not careful as business owners, you're going to be applying to your workplaces and stopping yourself from doing legitimate business. There was an article in the Fin Review again yesterday that set out by state in Australia the different restrictions that were on there. And most of them were just simply wrong, to be honest, suggesting that you could only go to work if you were an essential service and things like that. And it's just simply not the case. It has been said very clearly at federal level that all businesses are considered essential. This is in Australia. And that you can attend your workplace if it's not possible or reasonably practicable to work from home. And there's plenty of reasons why it might not be reasonably practicable to work from home, and including the ones that I have, and that's why I am still in the office. And I feel like there's almost a duty that I have to you guys to keep coming into the office to remind you that you can be operating your business at this time. You don't need to be stuck at home bemoaning the fact that you're unable to do certain things in your business. If you need to be in your workplace to do that, you can. And the first pivot story that I'm going to share is relates to that. So bear with me a second. So this is a client of ours up on the Gold Coast in Queensland. So Jonathan Rogers of Brave Life Social Services, a really good one. So he runs a business that has frontline workers supporting people with severe, persistent and long-term mental illness. They didn't have the option of moving to a phone or online-based business model, so have instead introduced a much stronger workplace policy around hygiene. Staff now carry PPE at all times, maintain social distancing, wipe down their work cars after each shift, and ask their clients at the start of each shift about current health before the shift can commence. So interesting, those are all very admirable steps taken in order that the business can continue to operate. Great, good on you, Jonathan, for doing that. I would add this, though, that the stuff that you're doing there is over and above the social distancing advice that we're given by the government. So what you're really doing it for, and you don't need me to tell you this, is to make sure that your workers and your clients are happy, so that notwithstanding the fact that the government has a lower standard of social distancing than you're applying in your workplace, what you're doing is keeping your clients and employees happy so that you get fewer of the objections to coming into work, for example. So good on you, Jonathan, for doing that, but still managing to work out a way to operate. But a reminder that Jonathan's out there doing his business, and we can be doing it as well. The second pivot that I just wanted to talk about was Mark Cowper at Leray Gymnastics here in Sydney and Rozelle. So even within 2 days, interestingly, of being shut down, this is a great entrepreneur. He pivoted to offering live Zoom sessions, gymnastic sessions. For term 2, they've built a virtual training area for their customers, which offers a 10-week lounge room friendly training program that you can get 24/7. So that's the sort of stuff that I hope when we bounce back from this, when we recoil from it, the spring movement back from this, that Mark actually has a new side to his business. And maybe where he's got his physical location in Rozelle, in a suburb in Sydney, that in fact he can be looking at expanding his audience and taking his business out beyond the boundaries of that suburb or those people that might travel to his operation. So hopefully what he's starting to see is opportunity, even through the challenges that he's faced as a business that was shut down. There's no doubt about it. He, as much as any business on here, has suffered from matters outside his control by being shut down by the government, and he's managed to pivot. Good on you, Mark. So those were some things that have occurred overnight. I had a chat with a client this morning, well, two chats this morning actually, that were both quite interesting. One was just discussing the difficulties that a client business was facing that runs a mixed operation, including a restaurant and some tourism operation, and the difficulty they're having with some inconsistent messaging at the moment. And I suppose I'd just say this to everyone: it is challenging right now. Everyone's moving quickly. We're trying to determine what are rules, what are suggestions, what is right, what is wrong. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I hope that you can continue to trust us as a source of good information. There was a question on our live stream yesterday that I just want to address directly, so that we can make sure that it's nice and clear. So Emma Davis, thank you for your question. Emma said that Ed had mentioned the rules had only just been released. This is yesterday, but they've been available since Friday morning. I've been hoping to keep up to date from these streams, and I appreciate the long weekend, but there have been 2 streams that didn't consider the rules, despite the fact they've been publicly available. Also thought I'd mention the ATO website says for the first 2 fortnights, starting 30th of March, we will accept, this is a quote from the website, we will accept the minimum 1,500 payment for each fortnight has been paid by you, even if it's been paid late, provided it is paid by you by the end of April. So those fortnights don't need to be paid now, which is consistent with Ed's advice, but they will need to be paid by the end of the month. I have concerns that your advice is not to pay when, if you get to the end of the month and you haven't paid, you may miss out altogether. So unpackaging that for a minute, Emma's right. The rules have been around since, I think they actually came out on Thursday night last week. And I've looked at them in detail. The truth is the rules don't really do much to advance the practical application of what's going on here. I will refer to the rules as necessary when we go through, and you can assume that any advice I'm giving, is being processed through the lens of the rules. So I'm not going to give you any advice that is outside the scope of those rules. I didn't pick them up until later in the long weekend, and I apologize for that. but there is nothing in the rules that is inconsistent with what the advice I have been giving over the last 24, 48 hours, and actually longer than that. The rules don't really shed much new light. The most interesting thing about the rules is the clarification of the terms from which you can start using things like JobKeeper enabled stand down, which are actually positive tools that you can use in your workplace if you're a JobKeeper eligible business. So that's the first part of that. The second part is this question of the ATO website, which says, look, we get it. We're kind of telling you to pay for the first fortnight, which has already been, and you've probably already paid for it. So you can back pay that. But if you want to get this, you've got to do it by the end of April. Now, to be clear, that's what the ATO website says. That's not what the rules say. So the ATO has just chucked in this extra rule, if you like, in the website that isn't a part of legislation. It's not part of law. And all I'm urging you to do is be careful, because that's the kind of misinformation that can get you tripped up in the wrong way. The ATO website, as it is positioned, suggests that you should be getting on and paying people, even though you don't know if you're eligible. Now, it can't possibly be the case that you are required to pay people if you're not an eligible employer, or you don't know if you're an eligible employer. And that's what annoyed me so much about this article in the Herald today, which is criticising businesses for not taking people back onto their books and paying JobKeeper, even though we're not even allowed to apply for JobKeeper at the moment. We're not allowed until the 20th of April to even make an application. So who on earth would be today taking people onto their books and paying them? The only people that could be doing that, and I stress could because I'm not recommending it, but it's up to you as business owners. If you're so convinced that your downturn is such that you are definitely going to get JobKeeper and you want to pay those people, go for it. But my recommendation as any form of prudent business owner would be to wait for clarification. Now, I know the ATO website says, yeah, you can back pay the first couple of fortnights, but you need to do it by the end of April or else. The reality is that by the end of April, we're going to have a better idea as to what the hell's going on here. We're only midway through April at the moment. So my advice is don't pay at the moment, but I will be here every day updating you as to what's going on. Now, I would be very surprised if by the end of April, we didn't have a much clearer idea as to the eligibility and application process, whether businesses are eligible. What if people are still not sure? Should they pay? All of those questions will come out over the next, the answers to those questions will come out over the next couple of weeks, and I will give them to you here. But right now, my position is you just should not be paying, even back paying, if there is any doubt whatsoever as to whether you might be eligible. And to me, I'm pretty conservative in my thinking. The fact that no one has told me I'm eligible means there's doubt. And I'm not willing to start paying out money to people on the off chance I might be eligible and I might get it paid back early in May. I need more information than that to make prudent business decisions. The one but to that, and what we're advising our clients is this, is there is a big but, which is for the group of businesses, and Employsure is one of these, where we have not yet had to make any redundancies, fortunately, nor have we had to put anyone on anything like unpaid leave at this time. So in that circumstance, we've still got everyone doing their job, and most of them doing it from home. And we are going to apply for JobKeeper. We don't know if we'll be eligible. I hope that we will be. But I've got to pay those people to do their job anyway. So the way in which JobKeeper will work is that if we are eligible, it will subsidise my existing wage bill. That's a very different set of circumstances to me paying people who are otherwise not getting money in order to make sure they're getting JobKeeper, for which I may or may not be eligible. There's much more risk involved in that type of payment, which is a lot of the questions that we've been fielding on here. So if you're like us, you're sort of paying JobKeeper anyway, because you've got to pay wages and you're just hoping that you're going to get JobKeeper payment to subsidise those in due course. But if you are in any way topping up or paying people who are otherwise not earning, then my advice to you is don't do anything yet. Let's wait and see what this application process looks like. And as we approach the end of April, if for some reason it's not clear by then, we'll start talking about the commercial decisions that you'll need to be making. So hopefully, Emma, that clarifies your question. So don't worry, the rules have been read and digested. I might be one of the few people that has got the interest or patience to sit through and read a set of regulations top to toe and really understand them. So you can trust me to be reading those and understanding them here. And then as to the ATO website, be very careful. Remember, we called the ATO yesterday. We actually called them again yesterday afternoon and said, come on, guys, you can't just, what use is a contact with you if all you do is refer back to your website and none of you know what the rules are? And the answer is that's the reality. They don't know. They haven't seen the application form yet. They are not told what it's going to look like, what the process look like, but we've asked them to escalate that. And we're told that in 48 hours, we'll get a call back from the ATO, and I'll report back to you as to what the ATO tells us over the next 48 hours. So a fairly breathless intro to all things JobKeeper at the moment. I can see the questions flowing through, Stewie. So let's get cracking on those.
Okay, let's kick it off with this from a certain encapsulation of a narrative, Ed, from Electric World Better Home Living. In regards to the employee nomination notice, we have not seen a drop in turnover yet due to a spike in purchases of essential items through March and April. However, we feel we may take a hit in later months due to low stock availability in channels from China. At that stage, we may need to look at our hours of operation and or staff to cut costs. Am I able to notify employees at this later date if we decide we will require the $1,500 top-up rather than before the end of April as per all the rules?
Yep.
We don't want to worry our employees unnecessarily at this time.
Really good question. To be honest, I want to have it. I'll take that offline as well because I'll have a look to make sure I don't misunderstand that. You're right that the rules seem to say that this needs to be done now, and you need to get on with the notification process. But let me have a look, because certainly you can apply at a later date to be an eligible employer. There's no requirement that you need to apply for eligibility now if you're not on your own reckoning or you've made some other commercial decision not to make the application yet. Now, as to the notification process for your employees, the indication is that it needs to be done now, but I'll go and double check that for you.
From Sarah, St John Ambulance in the ACT, she says she is a very grateful client. Can you please clarify again what systematic and regular employment for casuals mean? We have a pool of 10 casual employees who all work in a random rotating roster.
So what's the name of the business, Stu?
Sarah from St John Ambulance.
Hi, Sarah from St John Ambulance. You're a client. Thank you very much for that. Regular and systematic casuals. Can I clarify it? No. is the short answer. I don't want to be facetious or tricky in this. The truth is there is no black and white answer about this, and this is where that scope comes in for you to have it be. You'll need to be making commercial decisions to say, is someone regular and systematic? But basically, the way the law says is that you need to look at it on each individual case and work that out. Looking at the number of shifts that they do, when they do shifts, and so forth. So there is quite a lot of greyness around there. And as a client, I'd recommend you call us to work through those questions about each of your individual employees, and we will give you our view on that. That view, because there is no black and white rule, it will have a certain degree of subjectivity about it, and you will need to make commercial decisions about whether you are going to nominate certain employees or not. Now, you don't need me to spoon feed this information, but that for me is the loophole per se in this, that if you, for some commercial reason, didn't want to nominate everyone in your business that was otherwise eligible, the ones that you probably wouldn't be nominating would be saying, look, I don't think that person's regular and systematic, as long as you've got a reasonable argument for saying that. And that's where I suspect that you'll see employers saying, I know they say I've got to do this for everyone that's eligible, but I actually don't think this person's eligible, and I've got a credible argument to say that. And you'll need to be having communication, though, with those employees, because they'll understandably saying, well, why am I not eligible? And you'll be getting potential questions around that. So we can help you with that. So please do give us a call and we'll work through those questions with you.
From Karen, she's a client, the Pines Academy in Ingleburn, New South Wales. What happens with an employee about to go on maternity leave? If she is eligible now, when the paid parental leave starts, is she still eligible for JobKeeper while she is receiving paid parental leave?
So, an employee who, thank you for your business, first of all. It's fascinating to me to hear all these clients from different places around the country and lots of different industries as well, with the commonality, I suppose, that we're all going through these challenges together. In respect to the particular employee, so they are eligible now. They're about to go on paid parental leave. They won't be eligible for that period. So you wouldn't be paying them any form of JobKeeper subsidy during that period. But if they come off that paid parental leave period within the time the JobKeeper is still available, then they'd become eligible again. And you could start paying them JobKeeper subsidy, assuming you're eligible at that time.
A question from Rosemary Portelli. She's a client. It's a question we've answered quite a few times, but it keeps popping up. So, can I use JobKeeper against long service leave?
Can I use JobKeeper against long service leave? So it's been expressed as being usable against annual leave. It doesn't seem to me to be a problem to then, if someone has agreed to go on long service leave, you can't unilaterally force them to go on long service leave. But if someone has agreed and they're otherwise eligible, then it seems that you can. So there's nothing expressly saying you can't.
From Tracy, if we reduce full-time staff hours so they're only working the equivalent hours to the amount they are receiving from JobKeeper, are we required to issue a new employment agreement?
So you've essentially reduced their hours under your JobKeeper eligible.
Yes.
You have reduced their hours, presumably under the terms of the JobKeeper scheme, which gives you the right to do these JobKeeper-enabled stand-downs, which is a semi-unilateral right that you've been able to say, your hours are now these, and I'm consulting you, but this is why. Should I issue a new employment agreement? The answer is an employment agreement per se is really just a piece of paper that says this is the arrangement that we have for a certain period. So I'd certainly recommend documenting what's going on. So, and you could do that via an email. It doesn't need to be a physical contract which has signatures on it and so forth. What I'd be doing is having high levels of documented communication in accordance with the JobKeeper provisions. I am proposing that we make these arrangements. I'm giving you a 3-day consultation period as required under JobKeeper. Please let me know your views. Absent any views, or if we go forward from these dates, these will be your hours, and that will continue until the end of JobKeeper in September, or until I give you further notice, or something like that. That again, we'll work through through that with you if you're a client, to make sure you're communicating properly and you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
From Karen, she's a client. We are a not-for-profit community centre who offer a few days of childcare. We're trying to support our childcare staff through JobKeeper, but concerned as we've increased our turnover since last year because we were approved for childcare subsidy, CCS, which has meant increased usage and income as fees have increased. The business still maintains a loss, just not as much. We're concerned about eligibility. Should we call to seek clarification?
Great question. I think you'll get the same answer that we've had. You, Karen, thank you for your business, fall into a category of businesses that are not cookie cutter shaped. Like us as well. We're talking to our accountants at the moment about what that means if you're not cookie cutter shaped. You can foresee a level of downturn, or this time last year you were in a different circumstance and so forth. The answer to that is that there are apparently going to be a sequence of amended rules coming out, and they haven't come out yet, for certain non-cookie cutter shaped businesses. So we'll address things like you have purchased a business in the interim, you didn't exist last year, which currently might fall into one of those categories. So you might get some express clarifications in the rules, but there will still be businesses that do not fall within the strict definition. The best information I have at the moment is that the process sounds, because of the sheer volume of businesses, that there will be a level of self-certification, almost like an honesty bar, if you like, That's not written in any rules, by the way. This is just the feedback that I'm hearing from sources at the ATO that is not confirmed as the rule. But there will be a sense of self-certification that presumably what will then happen is that they will be regulating that to check to see if people have been taking advantage of the system or not. Now, in your case, Karen, it doesn't sound like you're taking advantage of it at all. So I would be surprised if when it came to it, your circumstances wouldn't be considered so that you could get the subsidy. Remember why this subsidy exists. It's to make sure that people are not out of work. And, you know, if the alternative is that people are out of work, then the government's going to be seeking to help you out.
A variation on a theme from Huang. I have a staff member. She is paid $1,600 per fortnight. When she is on JobKeeper, do I need to pay her $1,600 if she is doing less work than before?
She's on $1,600 per fortnight before.
Yes.
She is doing less work than before.
Yes.
Do I still need to pay her $1,600?
Correct.
No, you could reduce her hours in line with the JobKeeper rules if you're entitled to JobKeeper, but you would have to, as a minimum, pay her $1,500. So there might be a reason to reduce her hours by, let's say it's 3 or 4 hours. It takes her down to the 1,500 mark, but there's not much point in going below that because you'll still have to top up to the 1,500.
From Tay, could you please clarify again whether a business owner can elect JobKeeper for himself and not the employees of the business?
Could you say that again, Stu? Sorry.
Yeah. Tay asks, could you please clarify whether a business owner can elect to get JobKeeper for himself and not the employees of the business?
Can a business owner elect to get, if the business owner is not employed through the business, so they're taking advantage of either the sole trader or the director or partner rules and nominating themselves, can they do that and not nominate their employees?
Yes.
That there's a very sort of crooked loophole in the system there that you could in potential. This is the sort of thing I think the Professor Dan Landlade's talking about in the newspaper today.
Right.
That you could in principle try and do that. Would it be technically within? It certainly wouldn't be in the spirit of the legislation. Would it be technically possible? You might get away with it. I'm not sure I'd advocate it, but it's the rules don't specifically provide for you to be able to do that.
Question from Naomi, again a variation on a theme, but it's got a few followers. Can you please clarify how strict the 1st of March 2020 employed by date for JobKeeper is, as I have an employee that was employed on the 3rd of March?
Yeah, it's a tough one, that, isn't it? Because I think as well, from off the top of my head, the 3rd of March might have been a Monday, and the 1st was actually a Saturday, something like that. So it seems like there's quite a few people coming through who were employed on that Monday, but are seemingly therefore not going to qualify. Now, the face of the legislation is very clear on it. Those people will not qualify. And whether any form of discretion gets used in time, I don't know. But at the moment, those people are not going to qualify. So you wouldn't be nominating them as eligible.
From Sharon, we are rotating staff each week as work is available. We are already paying JobKeeper for unpaid leave. Some are taking annual leave, unpaid leave, or a mixture. Do they accumulate annual leave, personal leave, and long service leave while receiving a payment specifically marked JobKeeper?
Do they accumulate? So the position on accruing entitlements is that if they were stood down under the terms of the Fair Work Act, they would accrue entitlements. That's what happens under the Fair Work Act. If they've agreed unpaid leave, then they, which is essentially what they're doing on an every other week basis, then they wouldn't accrue entitlements, but what they're receiving is JobKeeper. So they shouldn't be accruing entitlements. What they should be doing is accruing entitlements in accordance with their new hours, rather than their prior hours, notwithstanding the fact that you're paying them JobKeeper on top of that.
From Patty with a statement followed by a question. So my understanding is this. For example, a staff member normally gets $1,000 per fortnight. You must then pay $1,500 to that employee to be eligible to claim. Question, Therefore, it's costing the business $500 more than normal?
It is in the short term. So I'm going to assume you're eligible. When I say I assume you're eligible, I mean that you, in due course, you'll apply and will be told that you're eligible. No one should assume that they're eligible at the moment unless you take that business decision to do so. Anyone that's earning under 1,500 and is currently still working hours and being paid what they were otherwise earning, you do top up, but you will get that extra $500 back in due course. Now, we're on the 15th of April now. Let's assume that you're following my suggestion and not paying a putative JobKeeper amount to the person because the scheme hasn't started yet in practical terms. But that at the end of April, you have some clarification that you are eligible, then you might back pay that employee for the 2 JobKeeper fortnights during April. So you'd be $1,000 out of pocket, but the rules say that you're going to get paid back by about the 10th of May. So you get that $1,000 back 2 weeks later. So the question is, can you afford $1,000 for 2 weeks? And there's plenty of people that can't, frankly.
A similar question asked a slightly different way from Fiona, wondering if a staff member who is 2 weeks short of the 12-month employment cutoff date is not eligible. Will they become eligible once their 12 months eventually clicks over?
Not on the face of the laws. It may be that changes with time, and that there's some movement on that, but at the moment, no. So at the moment, there's a strict eligibility point, which is at the 1st of March, and that's not going to move over time. So let's say, for example, you don't apply for JobKeeper until August, you're still going to be looking at eligibility based on that 1st of March date for your staff. So we'll keep an eye on that. Can I just shout out one question I just caught out of the corner of my eye, and it's one thing that's been I've found quite curious. So it's scrolled through, so I can't catch your name, but it was a really good question. Let's see if I can see it. The question was basically, why are we comparing this to this time last year? Like not all businesses work on the basis that, my March year on year is similar. And classically in a growth business. So I spoke to a really cool business this morning. It's a company we use actually called WePloy, a bit of a plug for them. I've got no financial interest in that, but they provide on-demand staffing through an app essentially. I'm sure they're doing a much better job of pitching it than I'm doing at the moment. But it's a very useful resource if you have short-term staffing needs at all. And they're a rapidly growing business. They're doing brilliantly. They found actually some opportunity during the COVID-19 crisis, but they may well have found more opportunity, but for the COVID-19 crisis. I can tell you for sure they're doing better than they were this time last year because they're a growth company. And this March is good, but maybe it would have been better. So they're another one that's just not cookie cutter shaped at all. So why are we comparing it to a year this time last year? The only people that really look on year numbers are very stable, quite static businesses that aren't otherwise growing. And the answer to that is on its face, they're using this prior year measure to try and give a cookie cutter shape to things just as a starting point. But I think that when you come to explain things, you'll find that you can refer through the ATO's discretion, refer to other periods to show them what's happening to your business, to explain a narrative that is not as simple as just looking at year-on-year numbers. But I agree, it's a bit silly using year-on-year numbers, but it's something. They've had to come up with a rule, and it's about as simple as they could do.
A scenario from Julie. Due to the nature of my business, I've had to temporarily close down. All of my staff are casuals, earning anything from only about $40 to $200 per month, and some don't work some months at all. So I won't be claiming JobKeeper for them. However, I will be applying for the New South Wales government grant of up to $10,000 for small business support. Apart from counting towards my workers' comp premium and applying payroll tax, etc., is there any reason you can think of why I would not use part of the grant to pay them what they would have been paid just until the end of their current roster, the end of April, as normal?
Now, I'd say openly, I know of the New South Wales $10,000 support to businesses, subject to some limitations on your size, turnover, and so on. I'm not completely au fait with what that's meant to be used for, but I can't see why you wouldn't be able to use it for ordinary business costs like outstanding salaries. I'm not aware of anything, but let us have a look at that, and we'll come back and reply directly on the stream as well to that question. But good point, though, is that, don't forget about the other subsidies that are there. There's payroll tax subsidies on a state level. There's also the credit that should be going through your tax at the moment on your PAYG. So make sure you're keeping an eye out for that as well as it comes through. So it's not just JobKeeper. We're talking a lot about JobKeeper, but there are other things out there. There's also some industry-specific ones. There was an announcement yesterday about export businesses, and there's a series of loans that they can tap into, or a loan fund that they can tap into, which I think will also include some tourism businesses. So a number of you should be looking out for that.
From Andrew, we've touched on this previously, but it's worth recapping on. I understand that the primary employer will be determined by where the employee claims the tax-free threshold. Is that correct?
So the primary employer will be determined by where the employee claims the tax-free threshold. I'd seen this suggested in the stream earlier. It seems logical. But the way in which it's going to work in practice is that you will, in theory, nominate your employee regardless of where they get the tax-free threshold, and they will either return that form or not. So in practice, they'll typically do it with the person that they consider to be their primary employer, who they're doing more hours with. If that primary employer, for some reason, they don't qualify through, maybe the employer themselves isn't eligible, or they are not eligible under the hours or arrangements that they have with that employer, then they may come back to you anyway. So it may be that someone is getting the tax-free threshold through an employer who isn't eligible, so they shouldn't come through you. So basically, the long and short of it is you will give them the form, and they will fill it out and send it back to you, or they won't. And if they don't, you'll probably be talking to them saying, why not? And the answer may be because I don't consider you to be my primary employer.
From Trina, with a few eager to hear the answer. If we let employees go due to lack of work, do we need to pay them redundancies? We will not be eligible for JobKeeper, but we don't have enough work for our current number of employees, and we cannot predict that we will need this level of employees in the future.
Can we let people go? Was there already also in there, even if we go for JobKeeper?
If we let employees go due to lack of work, basically the question is, do we need to pay them redundancies?
If you're a business that is of a scale that needs to pay redundancies, or there's otherwise provisions in the relevant awards, then yes, subject to their length of service, and there's lots of ifs and buts around that. The starting point, though, would be questioning whether there's a true redundancy situation. Redundancy per se is not. It's always been tricky, this, because it's sort of. Redundancy on its face is not just a cost-cutting mechanism. Saying I just need to save money, redundancy. You need to actually show that job no longer exists, which they'll often align those two things, and it will be one and the same. There was an article in the paper actually overnight that I think probably in the Herald and Age again, that said that there was a bit of sort of academic posturing around whether redundancy really does arise in this, because all it is really is a short-term period of less work, and it may come back. I don't agree with that posturing, to be honest. I think that the way in which the law works is it very much looks at whether right now that job no longer exists. It doesn't matter if that job reappears in 3 months' time or not. Right now it didn't exist, and you're within your rights to consider redundancy as one of the things you might do. I would say this, though, that when you tot up the numbers on redundancy, that it would be the last resort once you have looked at other ways of saving money, both in your staff costs and otherwise, including any subsidies that you're going to get. Certainly, we're treating that as the case at Employsure, not least because there's a cost associated with it, but also you don't necessarily want to be terminating employees that you've invested time in finding, training, You want to maintain your culture and all of those other good reasons for keeping people on your books.
We touched on this yesterday, but Michelle is asking again she's a client, she's from Stainless Steel in the ACT. We currently pay weekly. Would we need to switch to fortnightly in order to be able to claim JobKeeper?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for your business in the ACT. You pay weekly. Do we need to change to fortnightly? No is the answer. Also, be very careful on this. We've been asked different versions of, I pay monthly, should I reduce to fortnightly, and so on. The way in which you pay your employees will typically be contractual. So if I'm an employee getting paid weekly and you decide to pay me monthly, you're suddenly reducing my cash flow as well. And I've probably got an objection to that. So be careful. You can't unilaterally change when you employ and how you employ people anyway, and how you pay people anyway on the time frames of that, because you're basically impacting their cash flow. But when you are considering all the options available to you, if you're trying to work through your cash flow, you might choose to ask employees to go to some longer pay cycle, because it does help your cash flow. And you could say to your employees, for example, we pay you weekly. Would you be willing to move to monthly? We're confident that we can pay you at the end of the month the full amount, but we need these invoices to come in, or whatever it might be. But you'd need their agreement to do that.
From Max, is there anything documented yet confirming exactly how businesses prove their 30% loss? We saw an interview with the Ombudsman just 2 days ago suggesting you could compare March 2020 to March 19, or April 2020 to April 19, or choose to use a forecast for the next quarter through to June 30.
All of those are true.
Right.
So you're not fixed on using March. You can use forecast for it. It's all done based on your GST income, which is basically saying how much income. It's for some businesses that will be the same as your revenue. Are you receiving, which attracts GST? And on the basis of that, you will look at the prior year period. What seems clear from the rules is that you will be either looking at actual numbers or projected numbers, but you will need to be comparing them to the same period last year. That question as to how is that sensible? That's where an extra layer of discretion will need to come in. So there's quite a lot of stuff in the rules about that makes it look quite black and white. And the rules themselves on this are quite black and white, to be honest. So there's not much problem in looking at the rules and saying, okay, has my income, GSTable income, gone down by 30% compared to last March, or for this April versus compared to last April, or for a forecast quarter? Those are the kind of three versions of what you're allowed to look at. The problem comes is when you don't fit within that cookie cutter shape for some reason, and that's where the rules are not very useful.
Yep. From Megan, with a few people following this one, do you have any suggestions on how to manage the cultural impact this will have on businesses if we go down the JobKeeper path? That is, some staff working 30 hours and others doing maybe 4 hours for exactly the same amount of money?
Yep, really good question. The cultural impact. So my starting point on anything cultural, to be honest, is communicate. I once listened to a really good podcast about this that said that you will know you're communicating well with your staff when you're just about getting bored of the message yourself. You should be saying it so frequently that you're sort of surprising yourself that you need to even say it. That's just the way you need to be communicating at the moment. With high frequency, restating the same points, and so forth. So that's a fairly bland response to that. There are certain cultural problems that are going to arise from JobKeeper. One of them you've identified, which is some people getting paid more than they might otherwise get. Maybe they're on stand down or unpaid leave, and they're getting this top up to $1,500 while others are having to do work for it. There may just be a simple cultural problem of people worrying that they thought your business was doing really well, and you're suddenly on JobKeeper. What does that mean for my job security? Am I going to turn up and work as hard tomorrow if I don't know if I'm going to be around here? Should I go and look for other work? All of those things will be swirling around. What they all are is rumor and innuendo that you can really cut through by communicating well. And for example, on the unfairness side of it, I would be addressing that head on and saying, this is the way in which the government scheme works. We need to apply for this scheme to support our business through this challenging environment. Some people are going to benefit from the scheme over and above what they might otherwise earn. Some people are going to be asked to do less hours or are going to get a subsidy that is part of their current wages. There will be aspects of what appears to be unfair. That is the way the scheme works. We're in difficult times and we're working with the government to, first of all, get the benefit of the subsidy, but second of all, do what we're asked to do to play our part in this. And you've got to hope that regular communication will be taken well by your staff, to be honest.
From Claire, a short, sharp one. Do you have to stand down employees in order to nominate them for JobKeeper?
No, you don't have to stand down employees in order to nominate them. Stand down without JobKeeper is a very narrow concept we talked about here before. But if you are JobKeeper eligible, you do get this extra right as an employer. And this is a really important point, guys. It's probably the most important point for employers out of JobKeeper, aside from the numbers, the $1,500 a fortnight. And that is this JobKeeper enabled stand down right, which is giving you a unilateral right to reduce hours or to stand people down, even though the Fair Work Act had previously said, no, you can't, you don't qualify for this narrow version of stand down. So you can stand people down subject to certain hurdles that you've got to get over to consult with them and have a reason, a decent reason for their stand down short, but you don't have to do it.
From Paul, is a full-time employee that is on a stand down and is on a partner visa subclass 309 entitled to JobKeeper?
Full-time employee stood down on a partner visa 309 entitled to JobKeeper. My understanding is no, because essentially they'll get the rights of the 309 of their partner visa holder. But that doesn't entitle you to JobKeeper. The only non-residents, non-citizens that are entitled to it are 444 visa holders, Kiwis.
From Vivian, is the JobKeeper amount of $1,500 an entitlement to the eligible staff on top of what they are paid by the business? Or is the $1,500 JobKeeper payment an incentive to the business to keep people who are already paid by the business?
The latter, if you're a business that's already or still paying people. So the way we've stratified it here, and you'll see this in some new resources we've put up on our website following some, I suppose, trying to translate some of the advice I'm giving, but also some specific requests that we've had from you guys. So we are saying there are three types of employee. Those that are already getting paid over $1,500 and are still working, carry on paying them their normal wage. And hey presto, if you're an eligible employer, you're going to get a $1,500 subsidy, and that's brilliant for you. The employee really sees no difference. They're just doing their job and getting paid for it. So that's a true employer subsidy version. Then the second category is people earning less than $1,500, where they're still working for you for whatever amount they were otherwise being paid. They're going to get topped up to $1,500. So, yeah, in a way, that's where it's a true employee subsidy. They're in this better situation than they otherwise would have been in. And we've seen some great examples through here of, say, 16, 17-year-old people, students who are earning $200 a fortnight. If they're eligible, they're suddenly going to be getting $1,500 a fortnight. So they're in a much better situation than they would have been in. And the third category is people that were earning some amount. You have got them stood down or on otherwise an unpaid leave, so they're getting zero. And they are now going to get a $1,500 subsidy, which is, I believe, even after you netted of tax, going to be better than the job seeker arrangement that they might have otherwise been on. But I'm not an accountant, so I don't know exactly whether that's going to be better for them or not. You'll soon find out whether they say yes or no to it, I think. But that, again, is an employee-focused subsidy. So in category 2 and 3, the employer's not really getting anything out of it, other than the government would say, well, you get to keep the employees on your books. That's a good thing, isn't it? And I'd say, yeah, it is for some businesses, particularly where you've got skilled labour forces, where you've invested time and trained people. But we don't yet know what it's going to look like on the other side of this. So it actually might be a disadvantage to you to keep people on your books as well, because if you've got to if you pay JobKeeper and at the end of it, we're still in a tricky situation, then in September, you're going to start needing to look at other ways to reduce your staff costs, which might include redundancy. So you might be hanging on to people now that you're still going to need to deal with in September. And that's a practical reality that we're all facing.
From Graham, we are a not-for-profit whose GST-related income is minimal. If the ATO's metric is GST income, how would we be demonstrating a 15 or even 30% downturn?
Good question, Graham. It's not-for-profit. So I need to have a check of that. There are specific rules for calculating the not-for-profit piece, and we'll make sure we get those rules sent out to you via the chat here. But I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to get that wrong.
Yep. From Jenny, one that's been followed, it's again a variation on a thing that we've touched on before. Can we ask employees who get a top-up to work more hours to earn their $1,500 a fortnight? Do we have that unilateral power as an employer?
So I'm going to look at two different types of employees here that are getting a top-up. So first of all, those that are just doing their normal hours at the moment and they're doing less than the $1,500, can you unilaterally get them to do more? The answer to that is that the rules don't enable that. They don't enable you to say you must do more, unilateral decision. What I would hope is that if you're communicating well, leading your business well, they will do more. But there was stuff in the paper today with people, employer groups saying, look, people are just going to say no to that, aren't they? Now, I'm not even an optimist, but I still think that if you're communicating well and leading your business well at this time, asking more of your employees is likely to get a positive reaction given the turmoil we're all in. So there's no rule that enables that, but you could agree it with your employee, and I hope that that's what will happen. If the other category of employees are those that were doing more hours than the 1,500, you have now got them on agreed reduced hours or on some form of unpaid leave. Can you get them to come back in and do somewhere up to $1,500 or over $1,500? Now you're getting some cash for it. The answer to that is I think the rules can be used to do that, because what you'd essentially be saying is the temporary arrangement that we put in place because of the circumstances as they were, there's been a fundamental change to those circumstances. So we're reverting to your old contract. And then I'm going to, from that position in your old contract, I'm going to reduce your hours down to using the unilateral powers in JobKeeper down to the 1,500 amount. So you might bring them back in to reduce them again.
From Jules, she's a client, Cardzilla Printing in Cairns. Can you please explain how we get the eligibility figure for our business? Is it a comparison of GST paid? Is it wages? Is it sales value? It's all very confusing.
Hi, Jules. Thanks for your business. In Cairns, was it?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Can I explain how you get the GST figure? That through your BAS statement is the way it's done on your GST-able income, which will be reflected in your BAS statement. The problem that you've got if you pay quarterly is that BAS statement may reflect a quarterly figure. So you'd need to be looking back at the same quarter last year, but your bookkeeper or accountant should be able to help you identify what your GST-able figure was for March to compare March, or if April is a better month for you to compare, then look at that.
From Belinda with a few followers, if we reopen our business and get above that 30% turn down mark, do we lose JobKeeper eligibility?
If we reopen our business and go above the 30% turn, do we lose eligibility? The answer is yes, probably. The way in which, again, it's so unclear as to how you're going to get your eligibility determined. But what seems to be the case is that you will get your eligibility confirmed, and then there's going to be like a positive obligation on us to tell the ATO if our eligibility rights change. We get an update monthly. So if on a monthly basis you saw that, in fact, compared to same month prior year, you weren't experiencing whatever measure you're using, you weren't experiencing a 30% downturn, you'd end up notifying the ATO and you'd lose the access to it. So there's a world in which, and you'd need to crunch the numbers on this, and this is this would be very specific to your business, but there is potential world in which you're incentivized not to reopen your doors, I suppose. But if you could run your business at less than a 30% downturn from last year, I suspect you would.
From Karen, she's a client, Bandiana Neighbourhood House. Should we be applying for JobKeeper for people who are still working but paid under $1,500 through a government grant money? Would it be considered to be double dipping to apply and then pay the top up?
So people are still working. Thank you for your business, first of all. People are still working. They're under some form of government grant arrangement. And you're asking if they're getting $1,500.
Under
$1,500. Should I top them up on top of the government grant to get the $1,500? I suspect you'd have to declare that would be a specific thing to be working out. So yes, it would look like double dipping there. If the amount they're already getting paid is included in that $1,500, you'd essentially be getting money that you hadn't otherwise paid that employee. So you'd need to check that depending on the scheme that they're being paid under. But it doesn't sound quite right to me that you'd be able to get both.
From Sharon, she's a client. One of our employees gave notice on the 27th of March due to ill health. She declined to wait until JobKeeper came online and went ahead with her resignation. Do we still have to give her the JobKeeper forms?
So she resigned on the 27th of March and didn't work out any notice. Just trying to recall off the top of my head when the first JobKeeper fortnight starts. I think it's the 28th. So the answer is no. She might have been an eligible employee on first, but you're not going to be nominating her. So we've been going for an hour there, guys. It looks like, as ever, there's a lot of questions here. Interestingly, a couple of them, we're getting to a really quite technical stage of this now. That doesn't change the fact that I'm going to be making sure I mug up each day and speaking to you about those technical questions each day. Some of you are becoming more expert than I am as well during the course of this. So I'm very grateful for, I can see some of the responses coming out from people that are listening and helping each other out. Please keep that up. But at the same time, be conscious that we are getting into some meaty technical things. The questions, I'll make sure I carry on being clear as to when I can't answer them, because we just don't know some things still. I know there's a set of rules. There's a 50-page document by some lawyers that are meant to clarify those rules. The reality is there's still a lot of things that are unclear. One of the things that we've done, or a number of the things that we've done, is produce some documents that are now sitting on our website, which are just one-pagers that explain a few things. So there's, first of all, a document that is entitled, Should I Make Payments in April? So back to that question from Emma at the start. Go and have a look at that. It's very clearly set out as to whether you should make payments in April. Just a simple one-pager. And go and have a look on employeeshore.com.au/coronavirus/JobKeeper. I'm updated. Have a look on there. Then there is a nice one-pager that sets out step by step what you need to do and by when. So avoiding you having to delve into rules and conflate those with ATO websites and to understand what's going on. It tells you not just what the rules say, but what we recommend as best practice. For example, encouraging you to communicate more with your staff. And remembering that these are available to everyone; they're not just for our clients. Our clients get the perks of the fact that we'll help them interpret some of the communications and draft those for them, and so forth, and provide them with different memos and things like that they can help provide to their staff. So that again is employeeshore.com.au/JobKeeper. Keep emailing your pivot stories to comms@employsure.com.au, CEO and also we'll put these documents on Facebook, I'm told, as well, just so that they're easily accessible for everyone. But if, like me, when I get quite a bit of weird enjoyment, to be honest, reading detailed rules. But what I need as a business owner is simple one-pagers to help me understand things. Go and have a look on our website, or we'll post them here so that you can stay up to date. If you've got any questions, and don't be afraid to challenge me on this stuff, guys. You know, I'm trying to move quickly on this for your benefit. If you think I'm getting things wrong, if you've got information that I haven't, let me know. I'm all ears. We're trying to do this as a community here, guys, as much as it is me just sitting here telling you answers to everything. So that's it from me for the moment. I'll see you again tomorrow, guys. Have a good day.